What's up, everybody? Wednesday night, that means it's time for Mythic Conversations. As always, thank you for joining me for this evening's presentation. Pretty excited about what we're going to talk about tonight. We've got a little bit of news to talk about, including some official Four Horsemen news. And if you check out the table behind me, you can see I've got some Barbarians. So that's going to be the topic of conversation tonight. Going to be back to a little bit of a show and tell type episode after last week where I actually did a project live during the show. I figured tonight we'd change it up again, go to this format. So we've covered a number of others. Like I did one on goblins. I did one on winter themed characters. Was looking at my cases and I thought, you know what? I've never done anything about barbarians. And ironically, barbarians were one of the first kinds of customs that I did for Mythic Legions. So I thought that would be a lot of fun. We'll kick it and we'll talk about that. Chris, Drew, Anthony, David, Reef, everybody, thank you so much for joining. Let's get this underway. Welcome to Mythic Conversations. If you are tuning in for the first time and you don't know who I am, or if you're a regular listener and you just like hearing me say this every single week, my name is Jeremy Gerard. I'm a Mythic Legions collector and customizer. I also have the distinct privilege of being the digital marketing manager for Four Horsemen Studios. What that means is that all the cool content that you see at sourcehorseman.com is stuff that I help bring to you. If you want more information about my work and the things that I do, including some of the stuff we're going to look at tonight, you can check me out on my Instagram page. That's at Mythic Customs. You can also view my website, www.mythiccustoms.com. That's where I post all my pictures, recipes on how I built what I built. So if you dig it and you're inspired and you want to do something similar, you've got all the information you need. Of course, I'm also here every Wednesday night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time for Mythic Conversations, the live Mythic Legions weekly show, or live if you're tuning in live. Obviously, this is also available in my channel if you want to catch it on replay, especially if you're overseas and this is being broadcast and it's the middle of the night over there and you're sleeping. You can always catch it on replay. It is called Mythic Conversations because there is some back and forth. There is a chat window here on YouTube Live. So if you have any questions, if you want me to talk about anything, you want to pick my brain about something, I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to have that conversation. Certainly as I present, if you have questions or thoughts, hit me up as well. Greg said he was looking forward to tonight's episode. Awesome. Well, I was looking forward to it as well. Again, like I said, it should be a fun conversation. So like every week, we typically start with Mythic Legions news and what's going on. I just posted on the website, literally an hour or so ago, that the pre-order for the Shadow Equidron figure ends this Friday. So this Friday, that's August 18th at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, it's all over. The pre-order for Shadow Equidron ends. That was a pretty short window. It's a single figure. It's not like one of the larger waves where people are going to be ordering it so heavy that an extended order period is actually helpful because it hits a number of paychecks. This is a single $60 figure, so they obviously wanted to do a much tighter pre-order to get those into production that much quicker. So just posted that. So if you haven't grabbed Equidron yet, or I should say the pre-order for Equidron, the Shadow Equidron, you're gonna want to jump on that before 9 p.m. this Friday. Obviously, the figures are going to be available from other locations as well. There are other retailers, Big Bad Toy Store, Empire Toy Shop, Mall Fish. There's some of them that are all taking pre-orders for these as well. You will pay a bit more if you go through them. The advantage is, you don't have to pay up front. So if that's important to you, that's an option. There is typically an in-stock sale for things as well. But like I tell all collectors, don't wait for the in-stock sale. If your in-stock sales are great for stuff you may have missed, especially if you're new to the line and you weren't around for the pre-order, that makes sense. But if you're watching this show and you're around for the pre-order, there's no excuse not to jump on, grab it, or be left behind. Rafe saying, who's better, Conan or Thundar? I don't know. You know what? I'm never a huge Conan or Thundar fan. I'll probably go Conan. Anthony, let's discuss how Cursed is such a great Netflix series. I feel like I did that enough today, Anthony. If you missed it, there was a little bit of back and forth. For those who are part of the My Wife is Going to Kill Me support group, I'm a big fan of the show Cursed. I told the story last week about Frank Miller, one of the co-creators of Cursed, me making a custom form, which was super cool. They were talking about it on their show this week, and Steve was very, very incorrectly talking about the show Cursed, so I was giving him some grief today. But I think we've already covered that, Anthony. Other news, if you are not following Full Horseman Studios' Instagram page, first off, why? They share cool stuff there. But they dropped a pretty fun reveal shortly before this show went live, and that was a new gauntlet piece. So they posted right in there that, they know that they've been quiet for a while. There hasn't been many new reveals, but they're hoping that's going to change pretty soon. And they showed an example of something that just recently got completed. So it looks like it's one of the lower bracer armor type pieces. Can't really tell the size. Looks like a 1.0 size, which would make sense. They've said that they want to update the 1.0 parts library. They did a lot of that already with the Aether Wave. There's a lot of new parts for that library in the Aether Wave. We're actually going to talk a little bit tonight as we cover Barbarians. We'll talk a little bit about, the parts that are available for Barbarians, where some of the gaps are, some things that I'm certainly hope that they add into the line and into the parts library in forthcoming waves. But that's cool. I mean, anytime they drop a new reveal of something, a new teaser of something, I know that I'm excited, both just for the fact that it's new figures and new fodder pieces. Even when they do, even when I got in my PowerCon debut figures, the Laura Dragul and the Darina, even though there's no new parts on those, I guess with the exception of the kind of cut on the cape of Dragul, but the actual molded pieces, there's nothing new, but still I get excited just because it's new Legions. It's definitely been a while since we've gotten new Legions in hand, so really excited to start seeing that. And again, once the Aether Wave hits and those new pieces, I know that when Advent of Decay hit, having all of those new library pieces was absolutely golden as a customizer. So I'm expecting that to be the same type of reaction that I and my fellow customizers have to Aether. What else is going on? One thing I did want to mention, very, very cool. One of my loyal watchers, viewers every single week, Anthony House Seal. I talked about him over the last couple of weeks a few times, talking about his cool project, the Toy Forge. He's going to be offering 3D printed parts. I showed a really cool one of the dwarf style heads that was sculpted by Travis Canning that Anthony's going to be putting out through his Toy Forge. They're going to be doing something different. They're going to do something pretty cool where he's creating this whole series that he calls the Dwarves of Canning Valley. And the one that I showed a few weeks ago, my understanding is that one will be evergreen. So that's one that you can get, at any time. But then other releases are going to be fairly limited, and they're going to be for a short period of time. I don't know if it's monthly they're going to release them, but they are going to be pretty small production runs. So the first one, I'm not sure if the first head goes on sale this Saturday or news about it goes for sale this Saturday, but I know where you can find out. Check out the Toy Forge on Facebook. He's going to have all the information for you there. But definitely, if you're a dwarf lover, I mean, hell, if you're a dwarf lover, you're in heaven right now because there's so many cool dwarf cards coming out. But these are more. So Anthony just responded in the comments here. It goes on sale this Saturday. So check that out if you want it. Like I said, limited runs. So this is one that I wouldn't suggest you sleep on. If you want it, I would suggest you get in there. I've also got one of the things we're going to look at tonight. One of the Barbarian characters actually has some weapons that come from the Toy Forge as well that are also going to be evergreen weapons. So you could even pick up some of those at the same time, perhaps. I'll take a look at them later. We'll take a look at them later, I should say. You can have that as an option as well. What else is going on in the world of Mythic Legions? Let me think. So I dropped a little sneak peek today. If you were following my Instagram page, I gave a little sneak peek of a project, something I'm super excited about. The Akupara character, or race, I should say. This is the name of this turtle race that I kind of conceived. So this is going to be part of the Wolf King Custom sneak peek sale, which is going to happen at the end of this month. I had that on my desk. I don't usually participate in What's on the Desk Wednesday, but I was painting these parts, trying to get some idea of the colors I wanted to use. And they were actually early versions of the parts. There have been some updates to them since then, but I wanted to get those things painted up. I thought it'd be really fun to snap a picture of them in the unpainted version just to, give people a little bit of a tease. That'd be a lot of fun. So really excited about that. Cannot wait. I've already got some paints on it. I'm super, super excited for it. Just as I was excited for the Kitsune and for the Badgers. Super pumped for that. I'll probably talk more about those parts maybe next week, because that'll be closer to the end of the month to the sneak peek sale. And I know that they've got a number of reveals that are going to be coming. The turtle parts are the only ones that are directly from me that are going to be part of this series, but there are some other really cool teasers that they're going to be showing soon. So I'll talk more about that next week. Very excited. Rosedale, where are our Legion builders? Yeah, I'm not sure if I talked about this on a previous show. But Cornboy addressed this the other day, or a couple weeks ago, actually. Someone asked this, and, the bottom line is just that with all the delays that they experienced, especially with Aerothere was delayed significantly more than they expected. I do believe I talked about this, that the factory that does the tooling is separate from the factory that does production. The production factory wasn't that far behind. They were ready to get going, but the tooling factory was definitely impacted by COVID more than expected. Stuff got thrown really, really behind. There's a lot of new tooling in the Aerothere wave. That pushed Aerothere back, and ultimately it pushed everything back. They had a lot of plans for 2020. I sat down and talked to them about some of their plans for 2020. There was some amazingly cool stuff that just has had to get shuffled around. That's the bottom line. Had to get shuffled around. Lots of cool things are coming. I think they're going to end the year very, very strong with some really cool stuff, some really cool reveals for us. I can't reveal anything now, but all I can say is there is cool stuff coming, including hopefully Legion builders. Cornboy did say that Legion builders, they haven't forgotten about them. They want to still do something. They know the demand is out there. They're still in the plans, but it's getting pushed back. They don't know till when yet. But that's the most that I can say. KJ, nice to see you. So that's kind of what I got going for news right now. Maybe we can jump right into the conversation. Jump into the conversation about Barbarians. So Barbarian characters, they were one of the first kinds of Mythic Legions figures that I customized. At like a number of them. The first Mythic Legions figure I really customized, I've told this before, was like that blue-skinned Jin character, as well as the super simple part swap ones, like making kind of my War Dookie type character out of a Barbarian builder set and stuff. Some simple part swaps, putting a Carpathia's head on a blood armor. But really, when I started to look outside of the Mythic Legions line, when I started to do more than a single custom and started to build out like a larger display of customs, Barbarians are really where I started. And one of the main reasons was Masters of the Universe. So early on, when I started looking outside of Mythic Legions, because remember, this is back during Mythic Legions 1. There was no My Action Figure customs. There was no Wolf King customs, no Planetary Dog toys. None of these companies were out there producing parts. We today as customizers, it's an embarrassment of riches. The amount of parts that we have available to us is quite frankly stunning. It is amazing how many options we have. It's overwhelming. There's so much cool stuff. And I've heard a number of people today when I shared a picture of the turtle was on, a dwarf style body, a Gonks body actually. And someone commented and they said, it looks great. They need more fodder bodies. Absolutely. That's the problem we have now, is that we don't have enough bodies to put the heads on. Back when Mythic Legions first started, we had bodies. We were buying these things. The community collecting these was much, much smaller. So we had bodies to put this stuff on, but there weren't a ton of available heads. It was, again, absolutely not like today. So early on, Masters of the Universe, in part because they were sculpted by Four Horsemen Studios, so they had a similar kind of quality to them. They were ones that I certainly turned to, and a lot of other customizers did as well, to use on our customs. This one right here, this is one of the first, and it's a super, super simple, kit bash. I've talked about this before, that a lot of people, when I say custom figure, I honestly, if you pop a new head on a figure, I call it a custom. I'm not snobbish when it comes to that. There are some people that, unless you're adding paints and sculpture and all kinds of stuff, they don't call it a custom. If you're just popping heads or new body parts or something, they say that's not a custom. I don't care. Call it whatever you want. I call them all customs. By the strictest definition, this is a kit bash, sure. But this was one of the first ones that I did, and this uses a head from a Masters of the Universe Vicor figure. I have no idea who this character was supposed to be. It looks very much like Conan to me. When I saw the figure, it very much looked like kind of their take on doing a Conan without having to pay for licensing. That's really what it felt like to me. Now, I don't know if Vicor, if he's from one of the comics, or if there's a history behind them or their character or something. I just thought it looked cool. I didn't want to use He-Man because one of the things, and I'll talk about this more as well when I talk about wrestling figures, whenever I do customs and I use other heads, I try to use pieces that I don't immediately recognize. So that's one of the great things about the 3D companies, is they're creating brand new creations, brand new characters. I don't look at one of those heads and say, oh, that is Conan, for instance. I've seen people use like an Arnold Schwarzenegger type Conan head, and all I can see is that character. The actor himself is all I can only see Arnold in that custom. So when I look at customs, I like them to not immediately look like a character, unless I'm trying to make that character. If I'm trying to make a Mythic Legions version of He-Man, sure, maybe I'll use a He-Man head, but otherwise I try to avoid them. So here with Vicor, I remember seeing that head, didn't know who the character was, and thought it would be a fun head to use. Like all Masters heads, the opening for the hole, the neck port, is much smaller. The neck peg on Masters Classics figures are much smaller than on Legions, so it just had to be Dremeled. And this is very early on. I've had this in my collection since, I mean, the very beginning. Not since necessarily 1.0, because he does use some armor parts from a Gorthok Shadow Orc figure. But a couple waves in at least, this is one of the figures that I certainly did. Dremeled out that head, popped that on. He's got a Vicor cape, axe, and sword. And then again, I just swapped out the armor. This is an example of some of the early types of customs I did. I did a lot using that Barbarian builder body. It's funny because now Barbarian builder sets are fairly tough to come by, $150, $200 a pop. Back then, when I was customizing these, they were somewhat available. You could actually get them for the $50 price tag. And it just was such a great body to use to build on top of, to build these Barbarian characters. That was one of the things that I did early on to really start thinking beyond a single character and building out a larger group, like a little clan of Barbarians. Rosedale saying, I've been customizing off and on for 20 years, and it blows my mind how digital sculpting and 3D printing has revolutionized the art of customizing. Yeah, I mean, it's honestly revolutionized the art of creating toys. I've heard Eric Treadaway tell this story a number of times now, actually. But they talk about how the studio, For Austin Studios, they actually pushed back on digital sculpting for years because they knew how to sculpt traditional methods. They knew how to use, the clay and to actually make those sculptures. So they pushed back while they saw the rest of the industry going to digital. They pushed back, and he's talked about first trying to learn ZBrush and it just being so incredibly frustrating. Him just like wanting to throw his computer. He was so frustrated, which is really funny because if you know Eric, he's one of the chillest, quietest, just nicest dudes you'll ever meet. So I personally cannot imagine him just having a rage to want to throw his computer. But apparently ZBrush did that to him. But he's told the story that, little by little you have bad session, then you finally get that one good session. And it's like the clouds part. And then you have a handful of bad ones, but then you get another good one. And then the good ones start coming more frequently. And now he says that, they can't imagine going back to having to do it traditionally. He even says that it's so much easier on his hands. At the end of the day, years ago, his hands would just hurt at the end of the day from sculpting, with the clay. It's just a lot easier on his body. But yeah, digital sculpting is absolutely amazing. It blows me. Digital printing too. I mean, just 3D printing. I talked about this, but I remember my first kind of exposure to 3D printing was just seeing, those cheap 3D printers. You'd see them at like Barnes and Noble or something, and they'd have it printing, I don't even know, like some cheap thing, and it was all layer lines, giant, thick layer lines. And you'd look at it, and I would look at these, it was printing, and I would just say, what the hell does anyone want to do with that? Like, what's the purpose of this like bright blue plastic bust of Edgar Allan Poe they're printing that looks horrible because it's got massive layer lines in it? I didn't even know to call them layer lines back then. It just looked bad to me. I did not understand the application. When I first started seeing, modern, I guess you would call it, 3D prints, I was totally blown away. Even seeing the early Shapeways stuff that I got, I was impressed. I didn't, once I painted them, they weren't like that blocky, like I remember from the Barnes & Noble experience, but I remember getting stuff from Shapeways and painting them up, and I didn't really like the texture. It wasn't really smooth. It felt like it didn't really fit with, regular action figures, but they looked cool. The sculpts were awesome. And then seeing, the first ones I remember, My Action Figure Customs, obviously, they were the early ones to this community in doing 3D parts. I remember seeing some of their early stuff. ordered from them right from their first series. And when I got those in, I was amazed how smooth they were. Painted them up and they looked like they belonged on the figures. Really, really impressed by that. And it's just gotten better. The material's just gotten better. The sculpture have just gotten better. The variety, the options available to us with all the different providers. It is an amazing time to be collecting toys and customizing toys for sure. See what we got here. Some people chatting amongst themselves, which is totally cool. You can do that. Rosedale saying he missed the Barbarians and now they're bigger money. Look, the bottom line is there's a whole faction of Mythic Legions, the House of the Noble Bear, that's very Barbarian-ish. So there's no way that you're not going to see some kind of Barbarian-like figures going forward. I talked about this the last few weeks. I know a lot of people are buying Kronoff figures and Purple R figures, and they're repainting those bodies into flesh color to get Barbarians. That's a super cool option as well. Obviously, it's a fair amount more work, but that's a super cool option if you're looking to get one of those, at least body types now, and use that for your customs. So that was an early on, and here's another example, actually. This is one that I did that uses another Masters of the Universe head. And this was, I kind of wanted to give my Barbarian clan a little bit of a different flavor. I imagine this, I honestly almost imagined it like, if you think about like Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, the Kevin Costner movie, that kind of dynamic with like the two mismatched characters from very different cultures, and Azim as well as Robin. I kind of like that. So I actually paired him with Atlas, and I imagined them as warriors that met on the field of battle that helped each other out, and now they're very close companions. So this kind of almost Mongolian style looking character, big fur cape. And this is just fur that I got at the craft store. It's amazing. I got this before they started giving us like that awesome fur cloak or cape or whatever that comes with Fallon Frostbow and with Cassia. That's an amazing piece of soft goods. I did this before that ever came out, but it's really just Michael's craft store pieces. Big sword from an old McFarlane Toys figure. But again, this is just a Masters of the Universe Jitsu head dremeled and put on this figure. And it's funny because Jitsu is an expensive figure. Like, even when I bought that, I bought the Jitsu figure specifically to pull that head off and to Dremel it to put on this custom. So at the time, I might have paid, Jitsu's even more expensive now, but I probably paid a good $85 or so just to get that Jitsu figure, just to pop that head off. And that's, back in the day, that's kind of, you got that customizing bug. I don't want to keep harping on it, but today you get that customizing bug, and you jump on the Toy Forge and they've got evergreen products. You jump on PlanetaryDogToys.com. They've got evergreen products, a whole variety of them. Wolf King's doing sales. My Action Figure Customs doing sales. Teal Titan. There's other people coming out. Von Berg Studios coming out with super cool stuff. I didn't talk about that in the news. Von Berg Studios showing their cool Werewolf Hunter head that he's just debuted. He's putting the finishing touches on, and that's going to go live on VonBergStudios.com soon. That site launched this past week. Last week on my show, I talked about, hey, after this show's done, Brian Burke's doing a live show over on Facebook. He's got an announcement. Check him out. That's what it was, his website, Von Berg Studios. So now we got the itch to customize. We've got a bounty of options available to us. Back then, we didn't. So, you saw a cool head and you were like, oh, this is a really rare Motu figure, but I've got no option. If I want to put it on, boom, I've got to get it. Yeah, people saying they're hoping for the Vampire Brute that they showed off all those years ago. I got to tell you, there's stuff in the studio that I saw before the Vampire Brute that I saw over 2 years ago that still hasn't seen the light of day. So trust me, I feel you when I see tons of cool stuff that I want them to release. So all of you can see it, because I can't talk about any of it. So I want you all to see it so I can talk about it with you, and I want it. I want to put it in my cases and customize it and play with it. Okay, so that was, again, customizing Barbarians. That was some of the first stuff that I did, was starting to create, characters, just build out my clan of Barbarians with those heads. And you can still do that today. With everything going on with the 3D companies, don't forget that there's still other cool toy lines that you can use out there, especially if you don't want to paint. If you don't want to paint parts, that's an option. If you buy these existing figures, they already come painted. You may be able to use them in cool ways. One of the toy lines that I know a lot of people draw from specifically for Barbarian type figures is wrestling, which there's a whole kind of, rabbit hole to go down with those as well, because there's so many. So this is one of the few figures that I have. Actually, I think this is the only figure I have right now that actually uses a wrestling figure's head. And this is a head of a character named Sheamus or Sheamus. I've actually never seen a wrestling episode, match, that has Sheamus in it. I'm not a wrestling fan. I've mentioned this on the show before. I watched wrestling when I was a kid. There was also a period there during the Attitude Era that I watched some with some friends. But I certainly haven't watched it in, 16, 17, 18 years. So I don't know who these characters are. I find that a lot of the wrestling figures, I find their sculptures to be a little soft. I don't find to have the same level of quality and detail that Mythic Legions does, so I don't think they fit really, really well. But there's a handful of WWE figures that I've seen that I don't know if they have like some of that real scan technology, or if they just someone else actually sculpted them. There was, I don't know, a better sculptor, or the production was better. I don't know. There's a handful every once in a while that I see the quality looks so much better. This was one of them. When I saw this figure, I really, really dug it. And at the time, I built out my Barbarian clan fairly large, and I started to think beyond one clan. So I said, okay, I had a lot of Barbarians that were very kind of, I guess, like the Nordic type look, that, had like a lot of the Viking-y type quality to them, which I think that the Barbarians in Mythic Legions, like Atlas and the Barbarian Builder, I would suggest that that's kind of the tone that they're setting. They definitely have that Norseman type look to them. I wanted to create some characters that, were a little more kind of like Irish type looking, for lack of a better term. I called them my Highland Barbarians. So I wanted them to have like the red and orangish type here. That's what I was kind of going for. And I imagined them as, distant cousins of the North Barbarians. Because in my version of Mythos, it's not countries. They're all kind of related. Whatever. But this is one that I did. And this is an example. Again, I've talked about this as well. But this uses the Adamon body. And Adamon was the first figure that they released in the line that took a lot of these parts, like the metal boots and even the metal folds pieces, and painted them with kind of like a worn leather type look. And I remember seeing that, because I will tell you that is one of the largest gripes I heard early on. I still hear it today, and I actually agree with it about the Barbarians, is all the Barbarians they released have these gigantic metal boots. Now, this figure, these boots on him, that came, as I said, from a Gorthok Shadow Arc figure. But the only difference is the color. The Barbarian Builder figure had these exact same lower legs, right? So those giant, clomping tight boots that they've got on, I know that I don't picture a barbarian wearing that. A lot of people wanted like the fur leggings wrapped in leather, that type of look for the barbarians. And this isn't that, but it's at least not those giant metal feet. It's got more of that leather look. So I really kind of dug that. I thought that looked really, really well. The other thing that I think is cool here, just to check out, this is so easy, and I don't think enough people do this. Look at the way that his belts are positioned on his body. That's just 4 different belts. All I did was just use a bunch of belts and position them in a way to create a little bit of a pattern. You can do something cool where you start to you put one going one way, then one going the other, then another going the first way, then you start to get like that weave type pattern. If you've got a bunch of extra belts, just playing around with the configuration, you can actually get some really cool looks on your customs just by doing that. I mean, that's talk about LBC's Lazy Boy Customs. That's as LBC as it gets, but you can really get some bang for your buck there. So that is probably the only example I have in my collection of using a wrestling head. And once again, even though I don't know the characters intimately, I know enough about them. I know who Triple H is. I cannot see a custom that uses a Triple H head and not see Triple H. That's just my opinion. I know a lot of people like to do that to fill out their ranks, especially if you're new to the game and you're looking for affordable bodies, affordable fodder. That makes a lot of sense. It's at the very least an avenue that you can look to. I know a lot of people also like to use wrestling bodies and build on top of those with pieces. That's cool as well. Certainly an option for you if you're looking to build out some of those barbarians. Let's see. Yeah. Lipzig saying if they're backlog, it wouldn't help to discuss what you've seen anyway. I mean, the thing is, I guess the takeaway is that some of the stuff that I've seen, it's not that it's not out yet because it's that backlogged. They plan well into the future. This is not something that they're just sitting down saying well, what should we do next? They've got deep plans and deep storyline ideas. This is stuff that they've known. I mean, there's a Mythic Legions pitch deck that was out there early on, right at the beginning for them to get their ideas in place. There's stuff in that pitch deck, ideas and storyline concepts and everything that still hasn't been revealed in any of the lines. It's still forthcoming. They are very much, revealing this a piece at a time, which is cool. I mean, it's cool that there's that kind of depth to it because, as we've all said before, Mythic Legions doesn't have a storyline like a movie or a comic book or a television show or something behind it. So for us, it's really cool because there's that kind of that white space where we can buy these characters and make them do whatever we want. We can make them swap factions in a way that makes more sense for us and our sensibilities. But it's also cool that there's that undercurrent of stuff that they are working on. And a very simple thing to point out is Arethyr. So Arethyr, if you read Arethyr's bio, he is the personification of war. So war is traditionally one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Big surprise, they're called 4 Horsemen Studios. They're going to do the 4 Horsemen. But in the mythology of Mythic Legions, if you read about that, they talk about these 4 evil characters that pretty much wanted to destroy Mythos and enslave all of Mythos. And then the 4 heroic characters, the 4 heroic beasts who rose up to defeat them. And those beasts, those heroic beasts, there ended up being 4 factions of good warriors, good characters that rose up to honor what they did. The Order of Etheron, the Army of Laodiceus, the Council of Basilia, and Xylona's Flock. They are all based on those characters. Then there's also the evil ones. So now the evil characters have been banished for ages, but there's slowly starting to be rumors that they're starting to rise. There's rumors that they're starting to, come up. And the first one we've seen is Irithyr. There are now factions aligned with all of those traditional evil characters. And the first one we've seen is Irithyr. So just on that mythology, which is out there, we've seen Xylona in the Advent of Decay wave. We've seen Etheron in the Etheron's Dozen wave. And now we've got Irithyr coming from the upcoming Irithyr wave. So we've got two of the good faction kind of heroes of old and one of the evil characters of old. Well, there's 3 more evil characters left to go and 2 more heroic. So even just right there, even just at the most base level of the faction system around Mythic Legions, there's a ton of cool stuff left to come and a ton of cool story to unfold. So super, super exciting. Yeah, Joe, I agree with you. I mean, the fact that the story is open to make our own interpretation of it, I absolutely dig that. Like, I love reading their bios and I love what they are putting out there. I think it's incredibly cool and creative, even if I don't always follow it. And the example I always use is King Bromden Ironjaw. So King Bromden, according to the bio, is evil. I mean, he's part of the Legion of Irithyr. He's aligned with the goblins of Gob Hollow. Together, the dwarves of the Grey Vein Mountains and the goblins of Gob Hollow have aligned. They put years of distrust behind them to try to work together for their prospective. They both want to further their organizations, further their races, whatever, their kingdoms. But they've aligned with Irithyr, thinking that's the way to do it. So, I mean, hell, Bromden is a bad guy, and the Cavern Dwarves are bad guys. I certainly don't. In my display, Bromden is... Where are my dwarves? Bromden is way over on the edge, but he's sitting in a big old dwarven throne lording over the rest of the dwarves. I definitely don't picture him as a bad guy. So I love that, Joe. I agree with you. I love the fact that I can do that. I can display them however I want. I can create my own factions. I mean, I've done that as well. I like to think about when I create these worlds, even these barbarians, and I think about my Highland barbarians, that's not something that's represented in Mythic Legions in any way. There's no mention of the Highland area or Highland barbarians, but it's something that I created that I almost imagine my creations living on kind of the outskirts of this mythology. They fit in, with the stuff that's already there without having to create whole new concepts. I think that works great. Let's see. Are Cosmic Legions still a thing? Some Space Barbarians would be cool. All I can say is that they have said that Cosmic Legions are coming, and they've never said anything other than that, to change that, to say that that's not happening. So take that for what you will. Rosedale saying, if Irithyr is the first of the Horsemen, they've released about 200 figures. That means they have another 600 figures in the works. Well, I don't think the math works out exactly that way. I think that they're probably going to start hitting us with the other Horsemen. So we're already, 5 years into the line? I don't think that it's going to be every 5 years we're going to see another member of that group. I think we're going to get them a little quicker than that. Drew saying, no dwarf will be caught dead with a gob. See, I agree with you, Drew. I don't like imagining the dwarven kingdom aligning with the goblins, but I always dig the idea of there being like outliers. So I have a group of monk type characters, right? And I've shown them before, but the leader of my monks is a goblin. He's almost like kind of my tribute to Yoda. I call him Master Groda. But I like the idea of a goblin, traditionally, if you think about fantasy tropes, goblins, orcs, stuff like that, they're evil. I love the idea of characters breaking that, that fantasy trope and being a good guy instead of a stereotypical bad guy, or vice versa. A character, a race that's normally very, very good, whether it's an elf or a dwarf, being an evil character. I love breaking stuff like that. I mean, obviously, the Dritz books by Salvatore, that is the whole theme. The whole idea is this traditionally evil race, the Drow elves, this character, this Drow Ranger Dritz, deciding that he doesn't want to be evil, he wants to be heroic. 50 books later, they're still going. Okay, so let's continue what we're talking about here. A lot of dudes on the table over here. So let's look at a female. I saw some people talking about females. This is one that I did actually more recently that I really kind of dig. So this is one that the first time I saw this recipe for the head, it was by Matt O'Toole, Castle of Power. So what he did was he took... That was awesome. That was awesome. He took this head here. So this head that we just looked at, this Vicor head from Masters of the Universe, he took this head and he pulled the helmet off. Now, I say he pulled the helmet off. It's not easy to do. It's actually really, really difficult. Like, it is glued on there, but it's really, really hard to get it off. I worked very, very hard to pull that helmet off. But once you did, and I say helmet, it's actually the helmet and the hair. The helmet and the hair come off together, but they're not meant to come off that head. I did pull it off. Once you pull it off, what you can do is you notice this is actually a head that this particular one is from, I'm trying to think, I believe this is from the Faustia figure. So the figure from the Siege, is it Siege of Bjorngar? Yeah, the Siege of Bjorngar wave. Faustia. She's part of the army of Leodicius. She's like the red hooded cleric type character. Those hooded type heads, whether it's the male head like the Elf Ranger or the female head like Faustia and Ravina, you can pop those heads out. I've talked about removing heads from those hoods on this show a number of times. But when you pull that head out, I ended up trimming down the back of it a little bit and gluing this helmet on. And it makes a really, really cool looking kind of like Viking female character. Matt had done it and painted the hair yellow, a little more traditional Viking. I ended up going with a reddish because I wanted her to be part of my Highland Barbarians. Really cool weapons on this one. I was talking earlier about Toy Forge and some of the Viking style weapons they've done that are going to be evergreen. These are them. So this really cool sword and this like Viking dagger, which you'll have to bear with me. I know there's actually a name for this type of weapon, and I'm sure Anthony will let me know. I'm not positive what that name is. I'm not like a weapons buff. I'm not like a historical. I know all these different weapons. It's funny because a lot of people come into a line like this and they're really into like medieval history and they know all these weapons. And I come into it from Dungeons and Dragons. So I'm looking at it. I'm like, oh, it's like a dagger of holding, +4. A dagger of holding, bag of holding. But I come at it from a super different direction. Anthony it's called a Seax knife. Seax. I don't know. A sax knife. It's cool. That's all I have to know. It's a cool knife. I think Seax knife is Viking for dang cool knife. It's really cool. These are evergreen. So if you go to Toy Forge and you pick up one of the Dwarves of Canning Valley heads, you can add these as well. Super, super cool. But yeah, I really dig this character. Different head. Nice, cool look for the head. We don't have a ton of female heads in Mythic Legions that have the hair down. There's really just, there's Artemis Silvercord that looks so much like Artemis Silvercord. I've used it to make like a Mulan type character, but there's not a lot of versatility in that head. Obviously, we've got some of the more helmeted type heads, even like the Barbarian one that's like half helmeted. But when it comes to fully exposed heads, all we really have, right, is the one that came with Gwendolyn Heavensbrand, as well as Delphina of Etheros, the Templar figure. So this gives you another look there. I know a lot of people have asked in the past, hey, what about Marvel Legends heads? I've said this. I think that they're too small. I don't think they look good. This one, because it is a Mythic Legions head to begin with, I think it scales really, really well. You can see the belts on her chest there. That's an example of what I was talking about a little while ago about, crisscrossing the chests, the belts. You get a cool pattern there. Yeah, so Joe is saying, so Joe actually has these parts from Toy Forge, and he's saying the hilt and pommel of the sword look great with painted, tons of detail. Yeah, there's no way it's going to show up on this camera, but there are some really cool details in there. And he's got some other cool stuff too. He's got some other cool weapons. Definitely worth a look. A couple other things I'll show you around those Highland Barbarians here. One of them is something, so I display him with my Highland Barbarians. This is my version of Torgen. What I really want to show here is not so much the dwarf aspect, but these parts that I added. So this kind of like over-the-shoulder piece and this loin piece here, those come from a NECA Kratos God of War figure, specifically the version, I guess it's the most recent God of War. It's the one where I guess he's, because, I mean, God of War started with like Greek mythology, right? And now he's like fighting Viking, like Norse type characters. So I'm not a gamer, don't play these games, but my understanding is the latest installment, his storyline moved on, and now he's fighting the Norse gods. The new version of Kratos where he's got a beard and everything. I actually have a version of it a few weeks ago when I showed the big frost giant I made that I used like an 18-inch Kratos for. It's actually the exact same figure as this, but if you get the normal 7-inch version, these pieces are super easy to remove, and I think they look great. I put them on a dwarf. You could totally put them on one of the bodies here on a Barbarian body, and you'd be good to go. Absolutely good to go, no problem. It's interesting too, because I have seen some people, like when I see this head, I see a dwarf, in part because I know it as Torgen. But that's another thing that I think is worth mentioning, is if you are looking for some heads to use for Barbarians, don't be afraid to look at dwarves. A lot of the dwarf heads, especially the ones from the third-party companies, they can totally work well as a Barbarian. A number of the Castle of Power heads that I got from Matt O'Toole, a year plus ago, I got a whole bunch of those heads in, and they were all presumably dwarf heads. I think I used half of them on dwarves and half of them on Barbarians. They're really versatile. Even this is an example of kind of a weird Barbarian offshoot type character I did a while ago, but it shows this is my Barbarian Druid. So again, you're thinking about a clan, they're not all warriors. I wanted there to be different kinds of classes within that group. So this is a character that I created, my Barbarian Druid, but it uses an orange steelhide head with some antler attachments. But it's indicative of the fact that if you look at the Barbarian builder, the first Barbarian that we got in name, he uses that exact head. That head first appeared on the Barthar Shadowhorn figure, a dwarf. So there's already a precedent in Mythic Legions for swapping heads between dwarves and Barbarians. Why not do it? This is a figure that, kind of fun. Some things to point out here. He does have bare feet. I imagine a druid wanting to be as close to the earth as possible, so he wouldn't want his feet to be covered. These feet are actually from a gentleman named Marcus Akin. So Marcus used to post on the old Four Horsemen board as Dark Horse. Not really sure what Marcus is up to these days, but back then he was doing a lot of customizing, a lot of casting of things. I'm not 100% sure where these feet originated from. They might have originated actually from a Masters of the Universe Ular figure. I think that's the character, almost like a Tarzan-looking He-Man figure. Again, don't know where that came from, but I've seen it. They might have come from there because I know he definitely cast some Motu feet back then. But fun figure, get you that look. He's got a staff here from a Motu Eldor figure. This is an axe from a WWE, create a superstar character. So when you're building up Barbarians, that's one thing that I think you can do as well to have some fun with, is to think beyond like Viking Raiders. Think beyond like just, okay, these are characters that are going to raid a village and, mess some stuff up. Think about other types of characters in that barbarian clan that can add some variety. That's an example of when I started to do that. When I started to build out a bigger display and, every character looks like this, it gets a little boring. One thing I'll show now is a head variation that I really like a lot. And it actually uses the head that I just showed you. So that traditional barbarian head or bearded dwarf head, however you look at it, I've talked about that in the past on the show where I did about removing parts that aren't meant to be removed. So if you look at that actual head, it is technically two pieces. The helmet part is a separate piece from the beard. They're glued together, but with a little bit of force, they totally can come apart. Now, like any of the Mythic Legions parts that I talk about that are not meant to be pulled apart, that you can pull apart, sometimes it's easier than others. I've had some figures that they come apart almost by barely touching them. A little bit of pressure and force, and they're popped. There are others that are brutally difficult to pull apart. So how easy or how difficult this is really going to depend on the part you are using. But if you pull out the beard from that head, and I'm talking about this head right here, if you pull that beard off of that head, what you're left with is just the helmet. Now, the hole that goes onto the neck is in the helmet. So you basically just have that helmet. Now, a while ago, I had shown a example of taking that helmet, and I actually had sliced up a skeleton and I glued the lower skeleton jaw underneath that to make a new skeleton head. And this is exactly the same concept here. So what I did with this one was I made this cool barbarian with this custom looking head. Because again, I had used this head so many times, and I said to myself, you know what? I need to do something different. I don't want to just use that same head. So this beard actually comes from this figure right here. This is it's called Celebration Gimli. I don't think it's Ceremony. I think it's Celebration Gimli. This is one of the Lord of the Rings figures that came out at the end of the Toy Biz line. It's from the scene at the end of Return of the King, after evil has been thwarted, and Aragorn is being named King of Gondor, and all of his friends are around seeing his coronation. That's where this comes in. It actually might be called Coronation Gimli now that I think about it. But it's a cool figure. I actually got this in a lot of figures. I got others of them in a lot of figures. I decided to make use of it. So what I did was I heated the head, some hot water, get the plastic really, really malleable. Then I took an X-Acto blade with a nice sharp knife, and very carefully, because they are dangerous, I cut that beard off. I actually cut not only the beard in the front, but I also cut a little bit of the back as well. And it's not an exact science. It took some trial and error. I had to trim a little bit here, trim a little bit there to finally get the look that I wanted. And I just glued it underneath that head. You can see there's a little bit of hair in back there as well that I glued also. Really, really easy mod. The toughest part is figuring out exactly where to make that cut. Figuring out like, okay, this would come, this helmet would land right under the nose. So everything from the upper lip down is what I want to cut off. Super cool way. And again, this is a trick where you can do stuff where if you pull that beard out, just having that helmet opens it up to some cool possibilities to glue some other things, other beards, other lower jaws or whatever on that head to give yourself some new looks that way. So Joe's talking about the WWE has Viking Raiders tag team. So apparently that's a WWE line. Yeah, Joe is actually one customizer who I've seen use WWE figures quite a bit in his customs. I've talked about this. I'm not one to use other non-Mythic Legions bodies in my customs. It's funny because I can see other people do it and say, wow, that looks so good. But I guess I'm just so enamored with these parts that I have a hard time thinking beyond them or using beyond them. Yeah, Joe, I want to see some 3D guys make some beards to swap out on that bearded dwarf barbarian head. I'm going to be honest, I'm surprised it hasn't been done. I'm really surprised. The only person I've ever seen do it is Matt O'Toole. And he didn't swap out. He did it the opposite way. He didn't swap out beards. He didn't make new beards. He made new heads. So a while ago, long ago, he had done 2 different almost like head toppers that they ended with the gap that's similar to the helmet, and you could pop that beard up into that gap and create a new looking dwarf. But yeah, it's seemingly a fairly easy thing that they could do that I am surprised as well they haven't done it. The only thing that I would offer is you'll have a different looking beard, but you'll still have the same helmet. I think that Matt got more bang for it out of doing a different head part, but whatever. So a couple other things to show. This is one I'll show here that I absolutely love. And this is actually the leader of my Highland Barbarians. And this is one of the customs in my collection that I didn't do 100% of it. So this head here, which is actually I believe it started as an Adamon head. It's either Atlas or Adamon, but I think it was Adamon. This was painted by a gentleman named Quinn Law. So Quinn Law, he does Q Law Toy Picks, wonderful toy photography, super cool dude. He had posted a custom with this head, I don't know, a couple of years ago, maybe at this point. I just always thought it looked so cool. So when I had built this character to lead my Highland Barbarians, I had actually put the Adamon head on top of it. And I always intended to paint it orange the way that Quinn had done so. Well, then wouldn't you know, I just never got around to it. And then one day, Quinn posts a custom for sale that had that head. And I bought the custom only to pop the head off and pop it on to this figure because it's exactly what I had imagined. Like I literally had looked at his custom and said, I'm going to steal that. That's one that I'm going to take. And even better, I got the exact one. I just saw Anthony talking about the fact that the Spawn Viking series armor is versatile. That is what is on this here. It's a mix of things. Actually, the shield comes from a Lord of the Rings figure. The sword is from a Spawn Viking series skull splitter. And then the loin piece here is from a Spawn Viking series Bluetooth is the name of the character. And the armor is also Bluetooth. Now, the armor is just glued onto the strap. I've talked about this before as well, where that's a trick that I use because the Mythic Legion shoulder armor pegs into the back. If you're going to use armor like this that doesn't peg into the back, you got to figure out a way to attach it. The easiest thing that I find to do is to just, put one of those belts around, glue the armor right onto the strap, and you'll be able to get it there. This particular figure also uses this red cape that came from a Marvel Legends Thor Ragnarok figure. But absolutely, if you're building out Vikings or Barbarians, the Spawn Viking Ages line is an absolute gold mine. Come on, let's stand up. This piece here, actually, this lower piece here is also from that Spawn Viking Age series. This is actually a character that I put together thinking about barbarians being different kinds of barbarians. When I did my set of pirates that I called my Circle of Eight, because it was 8 different pirate captains, I wanted one of them to be a very barbarian type pirate. So this head is actually a custom from Kurt Daniels' Camaro Dude, and it's just an amalgamation of parts here. It's a Mythic Legions body. These arms, you can see these arms don't have like they don't have the metal hands and the lower gauntlets. These are actually from a Marvel Legends Thor Odin's son figure. They peg right in to the torso underneath this armor, which is from a Lord of the Rings figure. Underneath this armor is just a bear torso, like a bear barbarian torso, and those arms peg right in place. But yet another example, this is combining Lord of the Rings, Spawn figures, third-party stuff. This spear and these hooks and back are from Warcraft. The mace and the sword are from My Action Figure Customs. The arms are from Lord of the Rings. The head is a custom. There's a ton of different pieces in here, but if you look at it, it creates a really cohesive look and a really cohesive character. I would suggest that you would never look at that figure and immediately think, oh wow, that uses parts from 5 different toy lines and 7 different figures or whatever it is. Pretty cool. Those are some cool options for you. The last thing I'll show you here, I just brought this out just because I know a lot of people like to think about, oh, what kind of figures can I, fudge into my displays and everything. When I was pulling these out today, this is just one that I had in there. This is a Marvel Legends Boar character. I'm frankly surprised they've never re-released this character yet. It was part of a San Diego Comic-Con exclusive set. It's kind of cool because it scales really interestingly with Mythic Legions. It's large. So it's nowhere near as big as Ogres, but it's definitely bigger than the normal size figures. So if you're looking for that variety of scale, this provides a pretty cool option, I would suggest, because it's that size that doesn't exist anywhere else. It's almost like, again, I always think in terms of like D&D characters. Oh, we just had a fall. If you think in terms of like D&D characters or D&D races, I always think about that character kind of being like a Goliath. So a Goliath is a different race in Dungeons and Dragons, very large type characters, but definitely not as large as like ogres would be. I imagine him as like a Goliath type character. So some cool options there. Hopefully some cool ideas that you can be inspired if you're starting to want to build out your barbarian ranks. I know barbarians are super popular. People really, really dig them. So here's some cool ideas. Hopefully this show and tell was kind of fun. I'm going to check out the comments, see what people are asking about. Well, I'm going to have to go back a little bit here. Okay, let's see. Yeah, Rosedale loving the blue war paint. Yeah, that looks. I think that looks really cool too. What mounts would you recommend for fantasy barbarians? Someone's saying the Lord of the Ring horses. I think the Lord of the Ring horses are too small, especially with the horses that are going to be coming out. I still think the Lord of the Ring horses look cool with like the 2.0 figures. And I've used them with 1.0 figures, but I think once we get Balius and Atheon from the Aether Wave, those 2 horses, we're going to see those big war type horses. Those are going to look awesome. I have a feeling that people answered this. The Spawn Dark Ages and Viking line has great fodder pots. It also has a horse. So there's actually in that line, actually it wasn't in the Viking Age, it was in the Dark Ages line. There's actually a war horse in that one that I think it's called Bloodhoof. I think it's Thunderhoof. Spawn the Blood Axe with Thunderhoof is the name of this set. Those old Spawn horses are actually bigger than Lord of the Rings horses. Those look really cool. I think those would work with Mythic Legions, Barbarians really, really well. Yeah, Battle Cat, someone said, too recognizable. I agree with that. The wolf character of Ralph from the Rampage line by Lannard, which was actually sculpted by Four Horsemen Studios. That's a cool one that you can use as well. I've actually taken, and it's not a cheap figure, so my apologies. But that large figure of Ralph, the wolf, um, I've taken that and I've actually put like a Lord of the Rings. Did I use a Lord of the Rings saddle? I actually think I used a Spawn saddle when I did a custom of it, and you can see it. I think you should be able to see it on my website. But I did a custom of an orc. I called it an orc wolf rider. It was an orc, same size as Barbarians, but I used a Spawn. I think it was a Spawn comic covers. It was like almost like a black and white type horse, and I used that saddle to put on the wolf, and it looked really, really cool. I really dug that. I liked that a lot. Yeah, Nick saying go to Michael's and get some of the softish animal figures. Um, the problem I have with stuff like that is the disparity in the quality of the sculpts. So a lot of those figures, and I have one. I have a big giant polar bear from, I believe it's from Safari Limited, did it, and I have actually my Queen Alexandra from Seventh Kingdom. She's riding it. That's one of the few I've ever seen that sculpture wise I think is okay. A lot of those Safari Limited and Papo and all those companies that make those animal statues, essentially, I just don't usually find the sculptures to be up to the same standard. The sculptures or the paints to be up to the same standards as Mythic Legions. So I'm someone who I don't love to mix. It's weird because I'll mix lines like this. Like I'll put heads from other lines on my figures, but actually putting something like this as is in my collection, it's rare that I will do that. He's one of the few that's in the collection, and it's because he doesn't look anything like a Marvel Legends figure, like at all. Like if Hasbro does do like Dungeons and Dragons style figures and they look like this, they'll be awesome because it's a really cool figure. It's super nicely detailed, and it absolutely fits in with Mythic Legions. But I don't find that for a lot of lines. So to work in a mount or work in a character from another line, that's always a challenge that I have. Rafe saying a large bear would be cool. Yeah, I mean they've said in the past that Atlas rides a bear, so hopefully we'll get to see it. Rafe saying the Storm Collectibles Dragon mount. That is one that looks cool. I've never had one of those. I actually saw a sale recently that Bluefin Brands was selling the dragon with the mount and two packs, so 4 total Storm Collectible skeletons for like $200. And I don't really want any of those. I kind of want the dragon. I kind of want to look at the skeletons, and I was considering, but luckily I had a moment of strength, and I didn't drop $200 on that. But that dragon does look really cool. I've seen a lot of people. It's a red dragon, and it seems like it works best with 2.0 figures as opposed to 1.0. I've seen people use the Faustia figure on it. Again, she has the red hood and the red chest and cape. It looks really, really cool on that dragon. It's not a mount, the next thing I want to talk about, but I also just saw a teaser for the Storm Collectibles Mortal Kombat line where they showed Liu Kang dragon form. So I guess there's, if I remember years ago, that game, there was like a fatality that Liu Kang would turn into a dragon or something and I'll try to bite you in half. But apparently they're going to make the dragon. It's a big Asian field dragon. It looked absolutely awesome. Yeah, it's the Golden Axe dragon is what I'm talking about. Let's see. Yeah, Rosedale saying the Marvel Legends Ares figure scales well with Mythics. He does have that goofy skull on his chest. I totally agree with you. That is another one that looks pretty good. Just made my first order from Planetary Dog Toys 3 weeks ago. Should I be worried that it hasn't arrived yet? No, absolutely not. It does take Saba and Julie a while to get those out. They are incredibly reliable. They're just a very, very small operation. So they're doing this, just the two of them kind of on the side. I placed an order. Actually, it's probably about 3 weeks ago now, too. It's when they did the first day they released the new like dwarf heads, that it was both in ogre scale and dwarf scale. I placed an order that day as well, and I don't have mine either. But there have been times that I've waited almost 2 months for an order from Planetary Dog Toys because they're trying to get everything out. They're totally worth the wait. Do not have to worry, Eugenius. They will get to you. I guarantee it. Rosedale was saying Thorn Thunderhoof. We Talk TV. Lizzie from Rampage is really dope. I found it for $100. Yeah, it's an awesome figure. I'm a little jaded on it because I got it at Walmart for $20. So paying $100 blows my mind that it went that high, but it is awesome. Of the large scale figures for Rampage, I mean, the gorilla is not one you're going to ride. That makes no sense. But the wolf, I actually sold my wolf. I don't even have one anymore. I'm looking around to see if I do. No, I don't even have it anymore. The wolf I never loved because I thought the legs were always too thin. But the Lizzie, I actually have one up there. I have a bog goblin riding it. The Lizzie is amazing. Absolutely amazing. Can't say enough about it. Is it worth $100? It probably is. It's super cool. Yeah, Rosedale, you're saying the polar bears are some of the better ones. If you're talking about the one that I have from Safari Limited, yeah. Rosedale, some of the Jumanji animals, like the panther used for Dritz, work well. Yeah, it's not big enough to be a mount. I do really like that panther that I used for Dritz. There's also like a vulture. If you want to have just a vulture pet, that's pretty cool as well. There's a boar that I know a lot of people want to have like a cool wall, like a war boar for a dwarf to ride, similar to the dwarven character in the Hobbit Battle of the Five Armies. That's a really cool idea. There is a boar in that line. It's too small. Like I've seen people put a dwarf on it and say like they want it to look cool. It's too small. It's absolutely too small. Dean Wright in the UK, he goes by Geek Turtle on Instagram. He's got, I don't even know if he made it or where he got it, but he's got this like crazy, crazy giant boar. He might even have two of them that he takes pictures of characters riding, and it's absolutely awesome. Personally, I'd love to have something between those two extremes. The one he has is so big and crazy. The one from Jumanji is a little small, but yeah, the Jumanji figures. The Jumanji bear, I think, is too small to ride, but there are definitely some cool figures in that line that you can use to kind of maybe have some companion type characters. Okay. Awesome. So we're at 8:48 right now. I'm pretty much done my presentation for the night. I've talked about what I want to talk about. I think I've covered all the news there is to cover. So I got a few more minutes and, I'll answer some questions. One just came in. Greg saying, can you expand how you attach the shoulder armor and does the armor still articulate? So literally all I did was the strap, the belt straps that come in with the Mythic Legions figures. I just put that belt strap around his torso like normal. And then what I did was I just took this piece of armor, I put a little bit of glue on the actual strap itself. Because if you put the glue on the armor, then what happens is when you put it down, you don't know if the glue is going to actually hit the armor or the body. So if you put the glue on the actual strap and then put the armor down there and press on it, it'll stay nicely in place. Does the armor articulate? Yes, it does to a point. What's going to happen here is it moves the armor a little bit with it. You're not going to get full articulation. Like if you want to be able to take this outside and take photos with it in lots of different poses, my suggestion is bring some extra glue with you, because when you move it, it's going to release. You're going to have to reattach it. I'm putting this thing on display. I'm okay if I lose a little bit of articulation. I didn't really lose it. It's just if I truly try to articulate it, I am going to run the risk of popping it up to the point where the glue will release and it's just going to fall off. And I can just reattach it. It's no big deal. But yes, that's what I did. I try to avoid gluing things on. Actually, I don't use a ton of glue in my customs, but when I do, I try to find ways to glue them on to other pieces where it's not going to affect the articulation or something like that, so I can still pose it should I choose to. We talk saying, oh my God, your Bog Goblin on Lizzie pick is why I want Lizzie. I didn't know that was your pick. Yes. If you're looking at the right one. There we go. But this is my Lizzie with the Bog Goblin, and you can see what I did here is I actually made a custom saddle for Lizzie using some. These are actually like super cheap turtle shell or turtle toys that I got on Amazon, and I repainted all the shells. And actually, it's funny, the shield he's holding here is from that same set. It came with a bunch of shells. So I made this kind of saddle with those shells and some string that I got from Michael's, and he sits right on there. And that's my Bog Goblin on Lizzie. But it's an awesome, awesome figure. It's an awesome set. And then for kind of the bit in his mouth, it's actually just a piece of a Mythic Legions axe that I got some chains on. Cool. Thank you for the love on him. I didn't plan on showing him, but you were asking the question. So, yeah, it's funny. You mentioned that you saw the pictures and you didn't know that was me. And that happens to me actually quite a bit, where people will see a custom they really like, and then they'll talk to me about something unrelated and be like, oh, I had seen that on this other message board or something a while ago. I didn't realize that was you. That's always super, super humbling. Is there a way to contact certain customizers from MAFC to ask about certain customs, or is it just a wait and see if they get released again? I'm not my action figure customs. I have no relationship with them. You can certainly, they have a customer service email. I'm sure you can reach out and ask them your questions, but not something I can help with. So Rafe's saying a do-back works. Yeah, see, a do-back for me is an example of a thing that looks too recognizable. Like, I know that as a do-back. I cannot see that as anything other than a do-back. I can't see a bantha as anything other than a bantha. A wampa, it's too many years of history of those toys and those characters ingrained for me to see them as anything but that. Joe, who always offers good advice, saying, I recommend gluing a small loop of leather or pliable plastic under the shoulder armor that loops around the strap. That's a good idea. I should hold in place and allow natural movement. So what Joe's talking about doing is like actually gluing a little strap of leather around that. So that's cool as well. And there's the amount of like cool non-action figure customization techniques that you can use when customizing these is absolutely incredible. I've said this before, but I turn to my toolbox all the time to find interesting ways to attach things that allow them to still move and stuff like that. As you start, coming up with more ideas, you'll start to play with the toolbox a little bit. That's a great example. Joe's always got good stuff like that. Nick's saying, this is going to sound crazy, but I use washcloths for my fur and barbarians, and it actually works pretty decent. Dude, absolutely. There's a lot of cool stuff out there. One of the biggest problems I have with using fabrics that are available to us is the size of like the weave and the stitching and all stuff like that. To me, that's really where stuff looks realistic, where you can find something that for whatever reason, the pattern on it or the weave on it It scales well. Like, it doesn't look, I mean, we use it as a towel or a washcloth or whatever, but there are certain things that you cut it and it's just like, oh, the pattern on it looks like it actually would if it was made for this, 7-inch character. It doesn't sound weird to me at all. I've used so many weird things in my customs over the years that it's par for the course. So that's what I've got for this evening. I look forward to seeing you next week. Like I say at the end of every show, if you've enjoyed Mythic Conversations, give it a like. Let me know in the comments. Certainly, if you're not already following my channel, please consider doing so. And hey, spread the word. The Mythic Legions is an awesome community. If you know other Mythic Legions fans and Mythic Legions customizers that aren't tuning in, ask them to do so. Tell them about Wednesday nights, or if they can't make it Wednesday nights, tell them to check it out on the YouTube channel because I think they'll enjoy it. Other than that, I'll see you next week. Like my friend Drew always likes to say, same Mythic time, same Mythic channel. Until next week, I can't wait for that conversation.